Hello there, Michael.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you for having me on your show.
Do you know what? We're absolutely delighted to have you on the show. And I know that you've been busy campaigning for the Reform Party, as we say, in North Ayrshire and Arran. And before we get into that, I was looking at your website address, your website information on the Reform UK website, and we've got the address there as well, which we'll stick up. And it says that basically, am I right in saying that you're retired now as a retired economist?
Um, kind of. Uh, Actually, I worked for the EU and the World Bank, and I got to hate it at the end to the point that I don't say if a new gig came up, I wouldn't take it. But at the moment, I'm preoccupied by reform.
Good, good. And would you say that your experience with the EU and the World Bank is something that drove you towards reform, or were you were you mainly always a kind of a mainstream party man?
Well, I guess I'm an Austrian economist, so I have sort of um, nice feelings towards reform policies. But I worked in more than 50 countries for 35 years. So I used to sit in foreign lands and watch Nigel Farage take the EU apart, and then along came Anne Widdecombe, and I enjoyed it greatly because we had become such a bureaucratic uh, institution. And when I came home, well, every time I came home over all this period, I felt that the country has declined. You know, the last time I landed in Glasgow, I felt how dirty the place was. Um, it's got worse over the years, and somehow I got involved in this because I'm not a natural politician. In fact, I don't like politicians, and now I've become one. So here I am. I'm making a statement. I don't actually expect to get in, but um, but I'm trying to send a message. Um, we're going in the wrong
Absolutely.
direction.
Yes, yes, yes. And just when you say Austrian economist there, would you like to just briefly explain what's meant by that for those people who might not know what that particular kind of economic thinking is about?
Well, essentially, we don't like printing money, and we think that most of the policies that are highly socialist policies meant to, for example, take from the rich and give to the poor, actually end up hurting the people that they're meant to help. So, uh, you know, what sounds great in a soundbite, or when a politician says we're going to raise the minimum wage forever, for example, we tend to think, hey, let's look at the unintended consequences of this. And we discover more often than not that such policies do more harm than good. So, working for the EU, I'm an economist, but I have a law degree. We look at laws and we look at the unintended consequences first before we create a law. And what they do in Scotland is they churn them out for political. Um, uh, these are politically driven laws, as far as I can see, and they're not properly thought out, and the unintended consequences are not considered. They're driven through for political reasons, and and that bugs me a bit. And well, here I am. I'm making my statement, and like the title of your program, "A Force for Good," or for your organization, "A Force for Good." I hope that that's what I'm trying to be.
I think that's a fantastic way of putting it, and you're stepping up to the plate, as the Americans like to say, and you're putting your head above the parapet, as we also say. And there's not very many people who want to do that, who want to be bothered with the hassle of that. Most people just want to understandably not make an impact. Why do you think you're different from most people in that regard? Is it because of your experiences worldwide, do you think?
No, I'll tell you, I've had second thoughts several times that I've nearly backed out because you know, part of it, I feel the caliber of politicians and the way they behave is something that I struggled with. And it wasn't until I entered this race that it opened my eyes to dirty tricks. It's just the way that they behave. It's not the way my mother taught me to behave, uh, and I realised that politics is a much dirtier game than I even believed. Um, you know,
Can you give us a for instance if you're not breaking any confidences?
well, today one of my canvassers brought me a leaflet by the Conservatives, which said a vote for reform is a vote for the SNP. Because our leader our deputy leader in Scotland had once been a member of the SNP, but he changed his mind. He joined Reform a long time ago, and it says in one of our position papers, we won't have a referendum until at least 2035. Well, the word at least seems to have been conveniently forgotten. It's as if we want a referendum in 2035, and the suggestion that we are in favour of independence is just bizarrely wrong. And I know it's going to take votes from me. The other thing that bugs me slightly is the drive towards tactical voting. If it were a Scottish election, maybe fair enough, but a few seats for the SNP in Westminster is not going to make an awful difference. That I believe, vote with your heart, and we're all making a statement here. When I say I don't expect to get in, it's true. I would be delighted if it happens, but my main motivation is not the money or anything like that. It's to it's to try and change the direction that we're going in, and that's the statement I'm trying to make. And anybody who tactically votes is going to dilute our statement.
I absolutely get what you're saying, and I thought that myself. Okay, so a few SNP people get in at Westminster. They don't really have any power there. Sure, they have a power to annoy a lot of people on the telly, and you get irritated when you see them standing up at Westminster, and they've got the power to annoy in Westminster, but they don't have the power to actually mess up the country at Westminster in the way that a Labour or a Tory who's a member of the government can do. And so there is that. Although I suppose what they can do, the more of them who get elected, then they make all that money. And in a roundabout way, that also comes into the SNP coffers. So the fewer of the SNP, I suppose, the better in that regard. But as far as actual political power is concerned, they don't have very much at Westminster. But I do agree that when people vote for reform, they're definitely making a statement about specific policies that they do believe in. And that also helps those ideas to enter the mainstream. Because, for example, I used to be a member of UKIP many, many years ago, late 90s, actually. And to my knowledge, UKIP have never won a deposit at a Westminster election before or ever. They've saved the deposits, and in fact, they've had elected candidates at European Union elections in Scotland, but they've never saved their deposit. In fact, they only ever get 1%, if that, of the vote. But if reform were to save deposits in Scotland, if they were to save a few deposits, which is to say to get 5% of the vote or not, or more, I think that would be making a really big statement in Scotland. I don't know what your feelings are on that. Do you think that's a possible thing, saving deposits, getting 5% of the vote here or there?
Well, I tell you, if I save my deposit, I'll be delighted, and I'll be a little bit upset if I lose it. Reform underwrite it, but I've paid it, and we have some candidates who are not so serious. Maybe they will lose them. But I think in general, it depends on the polls you look at. We're polling between 4% and 16%. People tell me that the party is the most important thing, and the candidate's activity accounts for very little of the actual votes. But so I think Nigel's efforts have given us such a boost that we should, most of us, I hope, save our deposits. And who knows? I mean, there is no real poll until tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But if I lose my deposit, well, I'm 70. We regard this as a rehearsal for the Scottish election, quite honestly, and we're really going for it. But I'm 74. Do I have the stamina to wait 2 years for another election and then sign up for a 5-year contract?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I've been bitten by the bug to some extent, and I like the fact that when I go out with leaflets, I expect people to be hostile. I expect lots of rabid SNP supporters to be hostile to me, but it's quite the opposite. I swear that every second, more than 50% say, "Oh, great, good to know we have a candidate here, and I'll vote for you." I
Mm-hmm.
honestly feel we have a big silent base of supporters, and who knows how it will turn up in the day. That we canvass areas where we expect Reform supporters to be, but
Mm-hmm.
but they are nice to us. It's a fact.
Mm. That's right. The greatest asset is Nigel Farage, of course. Now we, a force for good, we have regular street stalls in the heart of Glasgow, in Argyle Street, and last Saturday that we had a street stall. And people who come up to our table, I suppose, are going to be of a certain type. But you get into conversations with them, and virtually everybody who came up to our table, and that would be in the space of 4 hours, and the people that we spoke to about who they're going to vote for, it was all Reform, and it was from the most unlikely people as well in some cases, people you would not expect because of various things here in Glasgow, and various football supporters and stuff like that, all voting Reform as well. So when there's a guy in a Celtic top telling you he's voting Reform, you're thinking, hello, as Nigel Farage would say, there's something happening out there. You know what I mean? So I think that, of course, Scotland's completely different from England because we've got this major fourth party, the SNP. And so new incoming parties such as yourself are not going to do as well as they do in England just because there's less to go round, as it were. But I do think that you could well save deposits, and I'm not saying that you will, because I know how hard it is for an incoming new group to save a deposit. I mean, 5% of the vote is a lot. So if you got that would be astonishing in my view. If candidates were regularly getting 5%, and if they were regularly getting 5% across Scotland, then they would almost certainly be getting regional candidates in 2026, because you only need 6%, sometimes 5.5% to get in at Holyrood. And again, because people have got 2 votes at Holyrood, then they can vote however they want on the first go, and then on the regional list they can take a liberty and vote for something unusual without knowing that it's not going to harm their first choice. So yeah, it's going to be extremely interesting. What do you think, if Labour get in, as people are saying that they're likely, how do you see the next 5 years going in the United Kingdom? I mean, that's a big question, I know. But have you given much thought to that?
Well, I guess that we're expecting taxes to rise to the extent where I have a dilemma. Do I continue this little making a statement game, or do I sell my house and move somewhere sunny? And of course, I love my home. I don't like to be driven out by the politics of it. What you said about the people that come to your street stall, we see it on our database as well. That where I live in Largs, it's a fairly affluent area, but we have the less affluent areas, and we see the membership from the less affluent areas. So when I go out leafleting, I tend to go to the houses of what I think are conservatives. But I discover that there's plenty of Labour supporters switching to us. And what we thought was older people would support reform, quite the opposite. Young people are coming to us in droves. So it's quite good fun that when people say they're supporting you when you didn't really expect them to, and that's gratifying. There must be something, but of course the tax raising the tax threshold to 20,000, the starting point, is a big impetus for lower paid and even for middle paid. It puts a chunk of money in their pocket, and people seem to appreciate that. I get lots of hostility over immigration, which I think is really crazy. That it's not that we don't like immigrants; it's the sheer scale of them that we don't like. And at Hastings, I had an absolute kicking over this the other night on the subject of how it's disgusting and abhorrent that we are against immigrants.
Yeah. Listen, do not take your average hustings audience as in any way, shape, or form representative of normal people, as I like to say, because the parties fill it with, I mean, that would be the SNP local team would be there, the Labour local team would be there, the Lib Dem local team would be there. That's who would be sitting in the audience. And they are indeed all for mass immigration, and they do not represent the feeling on the street about that, but they like to pretend that they do. And in fact, somebody's just said here on TikTok, Tepes says, he says the SNP are a party of failure, and yet people still vote for them, and that's true. And then Fraser says that he doesn't think we can trust Labour on the union. And I totally agree with that. And if anybody saw the front cover of the Herald on this Sunday, it says Labour aims to work with SNP to encourage immigrants to live in Scotland. Now, Labour aims to work with SNP to encourage immigrants to live in Scotland. That's who you'll be voting for if you vote for. That's the policy. That's the policy. And interestingly, sorry, I'll just read what Jackie Baillie has to say on this. The Herald on Sunday asked Miss Baillie how Labour planned to keep the support of Yes supporters who had switched to Labour simply to remove the Tories. And she says, quote, because while we might fundamentally disagree on one issue, which is the Constitution, we are absolutely in lockstep on a whole range of other issues which the Scottish Parliament is responsible for. So that's Jackie Baillie, Deputy Leader of Labour, saying that Labour are absolutely in lockstep with the SNP on a whole range of other issues. And many of us have suspected that for a long time, because when you get bad policies, we think, for example, that the GRR bill was a bad policy. When you get the hate speech policy, which we believe is a bad one as well, Labour always vote for those sorts of things in lockstep with the SNP. And there's the Tories, I suppose, do what they can to resist that. But we need, in the Scottish Parliament, we need strong voices who will oppose such things and who will represent people like you and I and everybody else who don't agree with that. And especially, but on Friday, we need voices in Westminster who will oppose that as well. Do you have any thoughts about how, maybe you can't say this, but how many MPs you think you might get down in England?
I haven't a clue.
No.
That no, I think anybody who forecasts this is really guessing.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I kind of appreciate Jackie Baillie. She's one of the few that I do. I think that if we have a Labour government, we will have more of. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the Parliament was set up, and I have a law degree. I think you have a law degree as well, Alistair.
Yes.
The the rule of law issue is something that bugs me a little bit. That the fact that the First Minister can appoint the judges and dismiss them as they want, it basically, and the unified police force being under the control of the government, basically, the Scottish government can do what they like. And this was created by Donald Dewar originally. It and it's been exploited by the SNP to the point that Michael Matheson can do what he likes with his iPad bill, and they kind of laugh at us when we object. And there are so many more things. I actually think that many of the problems caused by the SNP stem from this bug in the system in the first place, and that is a Labour thing. And I believe that the Starmer government will build on this. They will separate the powers further to the point that it's going to be very difficult for any other government to move in and depose them unless we get in at the next election. Otherwise, we'll be stuck with a Labour government forever, and we'll be stuck with left-wing policies until we run out of money.
Yes. Yes, that is a real danger. And just to remind viewers, we're speaking to Michael Mann of Reform UK, the North Ayrshire and Arran candidate for tomorrow's 75th ever British general election. And I do agree that Labour want to be in power forever. And Gordon Brown came up with a big plan back in 2022 called the New Britain Plan, where he had figured it all out, how you change the constitution in such a way that it will constantly be Labour. And it involved an awful lot more devolution. It involved abolishing the House of Lords and replacing it with a Senate of the nations and regions, which was elected. And in England, the regions would be 9, and there'd be Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, and they'd all elect people on the basis of defending devolution, essentially, into this second chamber. And all of that's still on the cards. That's all still a possibility that Labour will bring in, especially if they have a massive majority. But they haven't been pushing that. They've just been saying at the moment, oh, we're going to reform the House of Lords regarding how much you get paid and how often you turn up and what age you need to retire and stuff like that, which generally is not that controversial. But that big controversial one about scrapping it and replacing it with another elected chamber is still on the cards, and it could still happen. And if that happened, that would essentially be dissolving the United Kingdom. I mean, it would be just dissolving it into this crazy federal state that would look like something from medieval Europe, hundreds of years ago when they had all these little duchies and things like that. It would be impossible to actually govern it as a unitary state. And I think that's part of Brown's plan. So, yeah, I certainly do not trust Labour on the Constitution as far as I could throw Jackie Baillie, which would not be very far. So, and I'm sure she's a nice woman and so on. I'm sure of all of that. But politically, she's maybe got some funny ideas there about bringing even more immigrants to Scotland. Somebody said the other day, Labour are going to scrap the Rwanda plan. That would be the first thing that they do. Where are they going to send all the immigrants to? Well, guess what? It's an 8-letter word that begins with S and ends with D. It's Scotland. And that, this is what this has to be about. This is what this has to be about, as far as I can tell.
It seems to me, first of all, many Scottish people don't understand that this is a Scottish problem. They think it's an English problem.
Yes,
but they're here. They're in 200 in a hotel in Paisley, a bunch in the Watermill Hotel, in a bunch of them in a hotel in Erskine. And there are 10 Somali youths in a place in Largs, my small seaside hometown, where you would think that this wouldn't apply. 680,000 is 10 times the population of North Ayrshire and Arran coming in, illegal immigrants every year. It's huge. And there's a company called the Mears Group, which has just bought, I think it's 62 flats in Greenock for the accommodating migrants. So the scale of it is huge. And if people think that Scottish independence would be solve this problem, we see how they're fast-tracked right through France to their final destination of Britain. If we had independence, I guess they'd be fast-tracked right through England, and we'd have refugee camps at Gretna Green, and we would see how abhorrent they thought this immigration was, our immigration stance was, when we've got them right on our doorstep, piling in on such a scale. So it has to be controlled somehow.
Yes, yes. And this is why it's so important to get Reform MPs in tomorrow, even if it's just two of them, even if it's just like, say, Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson, God willing, get them in, and at least they can speak out against this, because the Tories and Labour and Lib Dems, just like the SNP up here, they're all going to be talking in lockstep, because their minds are still in their minds are in a place where the actual world has moved on now. I mean, their minds are still like in the 70s and 80s, when immigration was really very, very small.
Yep.
And they're still thinking that's the world. Well, you said 680,000 immigrants coming in last year. That's net. Gross,
Yep.
it was 1.2 million.
Yep.
1.2 million long-term immigrants coming in. And that's just, that's the as I see it, that's the destruction of the nation. And it has to stop. And all the guys and girls who come up to our stall, that's the issue. It's the immigration issue. That's why they're voting Reform. It's nothing to do with any other complications or technicalities. It's nobody's stopping this, and we have to start talking about stopping it. And the system has had 14 years under the Conservatives to stop it, but the Conservatives' minds have all been taken over by Labour's minds as well. Just that kind of Blairite attitude, it was the modern attitude of the Conservative Party, and it's brought us to this impasse where, thankfully, people like yourself have put yourself forward in order to make a stand, to step up, as I say, to step up to the mark.
Immigration is one side of it. Alistair, I don't know if I'm running out of time here. But,
no, go on.
No, the thing is, we also have falling food production. And when you've got more people and less food due to our net zero policies, I mean, whenever anybody mentions net zero, you're a pariah for being against it. But the policies are stupid. The policies have brought us some economic ruin, and the farmers are struggling. And like in my area, Ayrshire potatoes are just about extinct because they're not allowed to plough fields and because the agriculture inputs are so expensive. Vegetable farming is uneconomic. And here, so collapsing food prices at the same time as more people trying to eat the food is no wonder food prices are rising. And the other thing that really is bugging me is that we have a growing public sector and a shrinking private sector. And this is not the time to be raising taxes. When the productive private sector are paying the wages of the public sector, then increasing taxes, we will eventually have no taxes to collect. The golden goose will be killed. So I believe that trying to raise taxes, as the established parties are wanting to do, is exactly the opposite of what they should do. It's nothing to do with the Laffer curve or anything like that. It's just basic common sense. We don't have, our private sector is shrinking and our public sector is growing. So when Angela Constance says, I don't mind paying a little bit extra tax to get independence, well, it's not getting her independence, and it's us that are paying, the taxpayer, that's paying her salary and her tax. So the productive workers being strangled is To me, it just common sense dictates you don't increase tax at this point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Common sense dictates it, but common sense isn't
It's not very common.
is not very common, as they say. And you talked there about the growing price of inputs for agriculture, and modern agriculture relies upon nitrogen fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
And nitrogen fertilizer, for its creation, relies upon natural gas, and which is a form of fossil fuel. But Angela Constance and her brigade, along with the Green Goblin Brigade, they don't want fossil fuel exploited because, in 1,000 years' time, it's going to get very hot, or in the whatever nonsense. So it's all food shortages. It's all linked into energy shortages as well, which is all linked into this net zero myth. And I think among some people as well, that'll be why they're voting for reform. Because in my view, net zero is just another one of these crazy myths that's been got up that serves some people very well in academia and science and politics also. Good. What are you going to be doing tomorrow? Do you have any plans for election day?
Well, the thing is, we don't have the resources that the SNP have. We have I have a team of about 9 people who go out leafleting for me, but I started with 1, so I'm kind of gratified. I'll go around the polling stations as much as I can, and then I'll go to the count. I know that my local polling station will have about 8 SNP people standing outside it. When we deliver 100 leaflets in a day, a friend of ours who's a senior in the SNP said, "Oh, we did 1,000 today." We're doing our best, but we're growing. We're growing from no resources and kind of enthusiasm of the little group. So, so I know, I felt I'm a lone voice in this area, but that's the moment that Nigel declared, our database doubled.
Oh yeah.
It just went a bit crazy, and suddenly asking people to go out and deliver leaflets for you, it's a big ask. People don't really want to do it, but now yesterday we had 10 out. We delivered 2,500 leaflets. That's and we have 31,000 houses in our constituency. It's scratching the surface, but it's a step forward, and it's growing. It's really growing. It's a new era. It's a bit like when SNP went crazy at referendum time. We're growing so fast.
Yes, yes. Well, let's hope that tomorrow enough people will lend you their vote in order to encourage you you and others to go on for the next 2 years to take your message also to Holyrood, and that you're successful there, and that your success will also tie in with how successful you are down in England and the voice that you managed to achieve at Westminster as well. And we do need your voice because it's the voice of, as we say, common sense. So that's the top of the hour. Michael, thank you very much.
Well, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for all your support and your words of encouragement. It's needed because we get a bit fed up from time to time.
Oh, understandably so. And you mentioned you had 9 people helping you. Well, I'm quite sure that's more than the Lib Dems have got. I'd be surprised if the Greens in the Largs area have 9 people. I'd be surprised if the Tories or Labour even have 9 people. The SNP may have more than 9 people because they're sometimes a bit fanatical. They're driven by this big idea, independence, and so that does drive more activists to them. Whereas the other parties are more cerebral, and they don't have that. They're concerned about other things. Whereas, so it's not surprising that they might not have as many activists. But so I'm impressed that you've got as many as that in Largs of all places. So beautiful little Scottish town, coastal town, well known for its ice cream as well. So hopefully you'll be able to have a celebratory ice cream this weekend.
I'll do it anyway, regardless of the result.
I think you should. I think you should, Michael. So folks, that was Michael Mann. And if you are in the North Ayrshire and Arran district, you may want to consider voting for his party. And I do believe Reform are standing in all 57 Scottish seats anyway. So everybody's got a chance to vote for you. Okay, Michael, well, after the election, we'll have you back on again if you'd like to talk about that. You'll certainly be more than welcome, because I know you've got a lot to say, and you're a very knowledgeable man with a very interesting professional history. So
thank you, Alistair. Thanks for the opportunity, and love to come back anytime.
Great stuff. Okay, good night.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Okay.